6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, welcome back to Through Black and White Eyes with a very special interview with Keith Hackett. It's going to be very exciting. Lots of questions to ask about VAR and what it's like to be a referee and, you know, the pressures and all this sort of stuff. So it's going to be great to hear it from a professional mouth rather than us slagging all the referees off left, right and centre all the time. We'll let an old one do it who's done it before himself and who's been at the highest level. We've also got Pete to help and Blade to help with some questions as well. Really looking forward to this. So please, if you enjoy the show, hit that subscribe button, the usual stuff. You know what to do. Let's get the guys in. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. Keith, thank you so much for doing this. I know you've done quite a few podcasts already and you've probably heard a lot of these questions before, but it's nice for us to be able to speak to a professional and someone who's been in the game for such a long time and knows a lot of it. The first question I want to ask you personally is, why did he become a referee?
By mistake.
That's a bad one.
A long time ago, 1960, I was captain of a team in grassroots football, and the county FA said, hey, one of the members of the team's got to go and learn the laws of the game. I don't think with a specific requirement of actually refereeing. And then what happened was a sheer mistake. I did the exam. I passed. I think it was pretty easy, to be honest. And then we hadn't got a game on the Saturday, and I got a call from the county FA, and it went like, Mr. Hackett, yes, you're refereeing Hillsborough Boys Club against Sheffield United Juniors, intake school, 3:00 kickoff. And before I could say, no, I'm not available, the phone was put down. And so I nearly didn't turn up. I sort of had to, I borrowed a referee's shirt because I had no plan. I knew somebody, my dad did. So I borrowed his shirt, got my own football kit and my boots, went out and bought a whistle and a watch, an Ingersoll stopwatch, which you see, I see now in antiques. This is how long ago I see in antique stores. I'm sometimes minded to buy some for the referees who can't keep the time at the moment, but that's another story. Refereed the game and thoroughly enjoyed it. And then some weeks later, they said, "Look, why don't you take it up?" And I did. Little at that time, with any sort of ambition, you know. And I refereed 12 years at grassroots level. In fact, throughout my career, even if I had an international game on a midweek, you know, I can remember doing West Germany against Italy in the Euros, opening a Euro '88 game. And then on the Sunday, I got a phone call from the local pub, Blackpool Taverners. And Keith Hackett said to me, will you come and referee a football match? I went, yeah, fine. That's and there I did. And it was interesting because this was the local park with 26 pitches. And there I am refereeing. And there's a guy in the corner with a gabardine raincoat on. And I'm thinking, oops, be careful of him. And as I blew the final whistle, he heads in my direction. I'm thinking,
oh, God.
I'm in trouble here because the centre half and captain of the home team, Blackpool Taverners, I think he might have been drinking on the Saturday. So it wasn't ideally, him and I didn't sort of come to any sort of agreement on anything on the pitch. Brilliant. And during the course of the game, I lost it a bit and I told him to F off. And I thought, when I saw this guy in the gabardine raincoat, I kid you not, I'm thinking, I'm in trouble here. International referee accused of swearing. I'm really in deep shit. Anyhow, the outcome is this guy comes up to me and he said, yes, could I have your name? And I've gone, what? I'm then an international referee and the reasonable reputation. And I go, Keith Hackett, and he looks as though he's off a planet. and I've looked and I'm slightly concerned. I said to him, can I ask what you want my name for? He goes, yeah, he said, I've been watching you referee this game today. I think you could referee at a higher level. So I'm going to write to the county FA and tell them.
Brilliant. Is that why you dropped it? I was actually in Italy last night.
Yeah. But those are things, yeah. So little did I expect that I'd travel to 100 countries. And, the great thing is being on the same field. It's not the team. It's just like the magic of being in front of a crowd and the adrenaline rush. And then you're suddenly running alongside. I mean, for Newcastle, it was running alongside, Malcolm McDonald.
Could you keep up?
At the end of the game, having a knock on the door, and later on in Newcastle, having Bobby Robertson come in and question a decision politely, as he usually did. But no, I think lucky in that sense too, and I think a lot of people think that it's a bind. I think it is more difficult now, but I had pots of enjoyment from it.
Obviously refereed a lot of high-profile games, FA Cup games, international games, all that sort of stuff. What is through that career, your favourite game you refereed? Which one do you look forward to the most? Is it derbies? Is it high-profile games? Or is it just...
No, I think that, look, you can go on forever because, running out in Azteca Stadium with 120,000 spectators to referee Mexico-West Germany, or the Olympic Games in '88, Brazil versus West Germany. But for me, the one game that I will always remember is is Arsenal versus Liverpool in what was almost a poor FA Cup semi-final that turned out to be a 1-1 draw. But in reality, I'd been a Sheffield Wednesday fan, and my dad used to take me to the games. And I lived in a terraced house and lived about 3 miles away from Hillsborough Stadium. So we used to walk, my dad and I, to the game. We'd stop at the pub halfway. I'm only a youngster then. And I'd have the bottle of orange and the packet of crisps, mandatory. And he'd have 2 or 3 pints and more before we got to the game. And then I got onto the Cop at Hillsborough and would be aquaplaned over the spectators to the front. So when I got that call in 1979 to referee the FA Cup semi-final at Hillsborough, I was, it's a little bit like you've been asked, I think, to go out and play at Newcastle at St James's Park. It's just that special occasion. All of a sudden, I'm looking at where I stood, and never dreaming at that time that I would be on the pitch. And of course, the thing was that my dad had passed away, and the terraced houses where I lived had been razed to the ground. But nonetheless, I drove my car, parked it up on Wasteland, company car anyway, parked it up on Wasteland and walked to the game. So I walked the 3 miles to Hillsborough, passing the odd Wednesday fan that was going to watch the semi-final and them saying, where are you going? And I'm going, Hillsborough. But you're refereeing the match. What are you doing here? I'm walking.
I mean,
when the guy came in and said, what's your fee and expenses? I just did a South Yorkshire note. I didn't want anything. I didn't take a fee. I didn't take expenses. I was just that delighted.
Yeah. And it's the only way you would get to referee in your stadium, because obviously being a fan of Sheffield Wednesday, you wouldn't be allowed to referee any of their games. So it's obviously
That's right. Unless there was the odd testimonial friendly pre-season, but
it's not the same, is it?
No, absolutely not. And therefore, a full house and all that went, and obviously it didn't have the history of the disaster that took place later on. But hey, it was a game I always remember. There are many more.
Yeah, I bet there is. Pete, have you got any particular questions about Keith and being a referee and the history of that? Yeah. Before we get into the other stuff, because we've got a lot about VAR and all that sort of stuff, we want to talk about some nice stuff first.
What just is the most physical game you've refereed, Keith? The most feisty game out of all the games you've refereed?
I think that I had the pleasure of refereeing Newcastle against Sunderland, and that was pretty feisty.
Please tell me we won.
The noise off the pitch was more on it, and it was a game that shouldn't have been played. I'll be honest. I drove up from home, Sheffield to Newcastle on the Sunday morning. It was a Sunday kickoff, and it rained all the way. And the windscreen wipers were on the full journey. I got to the ground, walked up the steps, then down the steps onto the ground, and it was flooded.
Was this the 1-0 win when we scored the free kick?
Gallagher end.
Yes, and, I was there.
Well, yeah. Then you know how wet it was.
Yeah. I remember David Kelly went in at half-time, got changed, came out, and then slid straight off the pitch into a massive puddle, didn't he?
Absolutely. I tell you what, you've got a better memory than mine.
That's right.
What happened was, I walked on the pitch and said it was off. But the procedure then was to ring the Football League.
Right.
So I went back in and said, look, there's no chance. And I rang the Football League and they said, just a minute, this game's got to be played. And then the Assistant Chief Constable of that area, Northumberland Police, came in and said, all right, Mr. Hackett, we have a big problem. We've got about 50-odd thousand spectators. Not all are going to get in the ground, but they're in Eden Centre or whatever it was and various other places in Newcastle. And it's Sunday morning. They've been there since, Saturday afternoon. And if you put it off, we could have real problems. So it's got to be played.
Wow.
And I always remember it because you ring the bell and you let the players out. There was no pre-match sort of handshake and all that nonsense that takes place now. It was down the tunnel and one or two stragglers, Newcastle players leave and then Sunderland players leave. And then Kevin Keegan comes out the dressing room door, looks at me and goes, "You're off for so-and-so planet, you son. You've got to be joking." And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I can't believe that we're playing." And I've gone, "Kevin, blame the Chief Constable." And we refereed the match. At the kickoff, there's a few players who don't want to play.
Yeah.
They think I'm crazy. And the two captains come together and agree. And then I said to the guy who was taking the kickoff, I just moved across towards him and said, "Listen, don't kick it left-hand side as you face Gallagher end, because it's a bit wet there and it's a bit deep." And of course, he launched the ball, and the first time he got anywhere near it, half of it disappeared in the water. And he was just
Oh, that was a crazy game, that. And that shows you a little bit how football's come on, hasn't it? Because there's no way that game would have been played now.
No. The whole aspect now is from a security issue.
Yeah,
it's all changed. You have the referees, the modern referees, meet with the security guys an hour and 15 minutes before the kickoff. we're given a forward notice of any potential hotspots within the stadium. We'll discuss the abandonment of a game, and you can't, in the local park, you can say blow the whistle and come off, lads, we're not playing anymore. It's at professional level, you've got a 20-minute sort of patty nicey to play in order that all the police and stewards on the gates and conducting the trains and everything else are in place. So it's a different procedure. Wouldn't have been played now. In fact, I saw a game called off a few months ago with probably about half an inch of snow on it.
God, I remember back in the day with orange balls.
Correct. And I can tell you, red paint. I did a game, Southend versus Liverpool in the FA Cup. And again, that was another one that I wasn't going to play, but the Southend manager was happy because he got Liverpool. And Bob Paisley, who I thought was going to come into the dressing room with the manager to complain and moan, just said, look, get the game on. And that's the game where you saw John Motson, the late John Motson, with his sheepskins coat getting covered in snow. We all got covered in snow. Yeah. And again, just a quickie on that. I go to toss up and I give the coin to the home team captain. And I said to Emily News, the captain, it's your call. And he shouts heads as the captain of the home team flashes my 50 pence in the air and it drops into the snow. Disappears in the snow, and I've gone, it's tails. And Emily News says, do you know it's tails? And I've gone, saw it on the way down.
I would have said a double-tailed coin.
Yeah, I think it shows to some degree how refereeing in that era, you work with the captains, you work with the players. They didn't always agree with you. You didn't agree with them, but you found a way out of the thing. Different now.
Oh yeah, massively different. Blade, your question?
Hi, Keith.
Hi.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of ask, what set of fans did you hate having to referee against?
I never did, to be honest with you, because the big games and the big crowds gave you that adrenaline rush. That there was, you couldn't relax in front of big grounds and big spectators. You just cannot relax. I mean, one of the things that I used to find, I used to love refereeing at St James's Park. It was always a difficult ground to referee on because there always appeared to be a swirling wind.
Yes.
And wind can make it really difficult for players. They set themselves and the ball's gone and they hit the player and all of a sudden you've got a problem. So that was always a problem. But so Newcastle kept me on my toes, and I don't say it because you're there, but for a couple of years I worked in Jarrow as a consultant with a manufacturing company just near the side of the tunnel, and believe me, they had a workforce of about 600, and on a Monday morning and towards the weekend they'd all be coming to work with the shirts. Like the majority. And you had black and white, and you had the other colour from down the road, and so if you had an indifferent game and the odd decision, in fact, it seemed that when I went into the factory on a Monday morning, having refereed at St James's, it was the time when I appeared from a factory point of view that I'd made every decision I made was wrong. Because instead of just having one query, there were about 100. You'd be walking through and thinking, like, head down, get on with it, because you knew after a while who were the ones that would really give you a bit of stick.
Oh,
Out of fun and out of banter, but it was good stuff. Good
brilliant.
Yeah.
There's one man we obviously adore up here, and you might have refereed a few of his games, but not too many, obviously finishing in 1994. But I want to get your opinion on what he was like as a player to referee. How many times did you have the privilege of being on the same pitch as Alan Shearer?
Quite a few times. I think a difficult player. But, you know, difficult players are the ones that I used to like to referee, because they were the ones that used to challenge you as a referee. When Shearer went, the things that he got up to was that I learned a bit from it, because I did a game after I'd had Newcastle, and I refereed this match in a local league game, and George McKay, who was then a world-class referee from Sheffield, had watched me referee this game, and I knew he was there. And he came into the dressing room and he said, "I've got a bit of advice for you." And I go, "Okay, fine. Don't tell me if I've had a good match or a bad one, but I'll listen to the advice." And he said, "Right, here's the advice. I notice when the ball is in the air, you're looking at it, you're following it. Your head's looking and searching for the ball. Son, I've got to tell you one thing. It never, ever committed an offence. It's down below."
Yeah.
And I think that the craft of Shearer was that he used his strength before the ball arrived.
Yeah.
And that might be the dig of the elbow. It might be the flailing arm. It might just be the backside into the opponent. But it was just enough. There was no, like, I'm going to knock you out of the game.
Yeah.
It was enough to put his opponent off balance. And he was clever at that. But I'll tell you what, there was some degree of similarity between him and Malcolm MacDonald. And I know that might sound a bit daft, because they both could hit the back of the net. But they just had this sixth sense of where to position themselves on the field of play and reading the game. And I think that's the skill set that a referee has to acquire. Good referees see things before they happen. And by that, I mean, they get themselves into the right positions. A lot of referees make mistakes because they don't see it. They don't see the offences, you know.
I mean, an example of Shearer using his body so well would be against Chelsea, when he backed into Desai before the ball even reached him, ended up with a half a yard, turned it and smashed it in from 35 yards. It was just where did that come from?
Well, I mean, you had a similarity with Dalglish, because what Dalglish used to do is, if you're on my blind side, he would grab the back of the shirt of the player who is the defender. So he'd grab hold of the shirt as the ball's coming, he'd pull it, putting the defender off, and then spin round and gain 2 or 3 yards.
Clever.
And I remember 2 or 3 games in refereeing, I didn't pick that up. And then I just watched the game afterwards, which is very rare. And I suddenly saw him doing this thing. And then another referee who said the same. Hey, it's a tactic. And so you pick up, you learn that, and then you can get in early and get involved. But Shearer, Andy Gray, Tony Haitley, there were lots of them around, you know.
The dark arts has been around a long time.
Yeah. But they would belong to that centre forward club, the real number 9s. We don't see many real number 9s now, do we?
No, I'd say Haaland is probably.
Well, he's
a number 9.
He is. But he don't last 90 minutes, does he?
No, he doesn't have to. He scored 4 by the time he's come off after 70, hasn't he? He's a beast, isn't he?
He knows where the net is. But he's got great service. That's big.
That always helps. I mean, Shearer wouldn't have scored the amount of goals he got if he didn't have great service on the wing, especially for Blackburn.
Was it Chris Sutton?
Yes.
Yeah.
Him and Sutton
Yeah.
up front. The SAS they called it, didn't they?
Yeah. And it was like Ian Rush with Dalglish, but he didn't. Rush also had John Barnes on the wing, and they made the difference. They fed in quite well.
Pete, any more questions on this side of it before we go on to the other side of things?
I think. What do you think is the best game you've refereed out of all your refereeing career? The best game of all time?
I think that you always go to a cup final, but I was lucky because I had the replay, and I think the replay with Ricky Villa scoring the winning goal, and it being a tight game, and against Man City, you remember that because it's an occasion, it's history, isn't it? And so that dwells with you. I think refereeing under the torch at the Olympic Stadium, the semi-final that went to extra time and then penalty kicks with a West Germany, Brazil had an outstanding team. Was always good. Equally, refereeing in countries that you never thought. I suppose that another one that sticks in the mind is I did the last game between an East and West Germany side on unification night. So did the game, and then we drove several miles to watch people standing on the wall, knocking it down, and having refereed a lot in the Eastern Bloc, having to walk yourself through Checkpoint Charlie, and the fear factor initially when you're going into a country where people can't escape and they get shot if you're trying to get over the wall. All those sort of things. Refereeing Gdansk against Juve at the time of the uprising. No Western person was allowed in, but they got to put up with Juve and their players and the referee from England. And on that occasion, the morning of the match, I met Lech Walesa, who then became the president. And those are the sort of things that I think football gives you memories.
I've definitely got a lot of them.
Yeah. Fortunately.
Blade, what about you? Any more questions on this side of it?
Yeah, just a quick one on the East-West Germany game. Why didn't you send David Hasselhoff off the wall before we started to release more songs?
Yeah, I think that when you actually look and you've been into the Eastern Bloc countries and you see how people were living, when you actually saw the queues for bread, and then you were living in a 5-star hotel, and across was and most of the people having breakfast were part of the Stasi or the Politburo or whatever. If you're in Russia, they're having the time of their life when the normal citizen was struggling to get food on a daily basis. And it's those sort of things that you remember, going into Romania and, watching, if you like, the two sides of the country. Those people that want to play football, if you like, at the very highest level and earning money, and those down below that struggle for a living, and that was sometimes difficult to see. But one of the things you saw was how they trained, the physical side, and all that went with it. Going to the Olympic Games in '88, I had the opportunity of seeing other sports, and at that point learned a lot about sports science, nutrition, and that's when I took over the PGMOL and became the boss of the PGMOL. That's the first thing that I introduced: full-time sports science, scientist, running coach, nutritionist, vision scientist, had all their eyes checked, And sports psychologist, Professor Craig Mahoney, who's now Chancellor of a university, dealing with things like body language. If you communication of a referee, again, is 55% of it is through visual body language. 38% is if you raise your voice, we'll get through. But generally, if you talk normally, only 7% of what you say gets through to players anyway, in that sense. So you see how, in a way, you've got to be a little bit theatrical when you're out on the field of play. Sadly, a lot of our referees, current crop of referees, are neutral. You don't see the personality come through. But I think that is because their boss over the years has been one Mike Riley, who had zero personality himself.
Brilliant. We need to talk about this instance. So the FA not taking any action, which I think is the right decision personally. Keith, what were your thoughts on it when you saw it? I mean, Andrew Robertson puts his hands on him. Your natural reaction is to move your arm towards to get the player off you. You don't know what's going to happen behind you. He's kind of blindsided. I mean, I personally think it was a mountain out of a molehill that was made of it.
Yeah. I write for the Daily Telegraph, and I wasn't watching that game, but they then sent me a clip and said, "Look, you need to get involved, have a look at it."
Yeah.
I took that view. I took the view that the linesman was trying to break away from a player who's in his face, and I think anybody in football must know how Robertson is as a player. He's in your ear. He's in your face. As many of them are. So the dilemma, I said, I made it clear what the dilemma was for the FA. One, they've got to investigate. They've got to look at all angles, and they've got to have the knowledge of what the player has said and what the assistant has said. Yeah. Because I actually said this: if they found him guilty, then, and remember, it's dealt with by the FA and not the PGMOL. It's the FA deal with. I said, if they find him guilty, the PGMOL, putting myself in the position of as being the former boss, would have a problem.
Yeah.
And that problem might be that if it goes on from being an action that is, if they found guilty, could then come into the realms of gross misconduct, and potentially a referee being fired or an assistant being fired. That's the dilemma of the situation. And I think at the end of the day, common sense came about. And what I think I would say is this: a player doesn't have a right to put his hands on a referee, and neither does the referee. And what I said, the thing that disappointed me about the assistant referee is he goes through a lot of training. And I talk about the C's in refereeing: consistency, communication, common sense. And one of those is composure.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important for a referee or assistant referee, under stress, under duress, to hold his composure. And I felt that he'd lost it a bit.
Yeah. I mean, he's not a man you would mess with, though, is he?
No. Well, I mean, I smile because little did I think that when I brought a sports scientist into the game, and having seen the guys in the gym and all that goes with it, that the outcome would be that we would have somebody that would be that shape, rather threatening towards a player. But I suppose fitness is important, and referees in the modern game have to be very fit. And in my era, we'd probably train 2 or 3 times a week, running around a football pitch, and then if you got a bit tired, fine. Well, that's it. We've quit. No supervision until we get polar heart monitors and regimes that I brought in that gets them to covering 11.5K in a game minimum and up to 50 sprints in a game. So we moved it, we changed it, and but then look, I got 35 quid for refereeing the cup final. These guys are earning 100,000 now, so it's the game's moved on, and so it's this era. I think it's just the fact is that having been the guy, as when I retired, I put forward a proposal to the Premier League that referees had to be professional. And that they had to invest in that and worked hard to secure that, and then became the first development manager. I didn't want the job running the show because I didn't want to move to London. I've always lived in Sheffield, so I didn't want to move, and I didn't want the mortgage that you had invested in London. But at that point, we knew that if you're now earning, then it was about 40 odd grand. If you're earning about that, then you've got to put something back into it. And now, of course, I think they're fit, but they're not mobile enough. But there's lots of things that we can get into.
Oh hell yeah. Do you know how we were blowing smoke up Haaland's backside about how good he is? He's missed a penalty.
Oh, I think also buying that down to 10 men as well.
Oh, well, there we go. That's game over for them. Andy says, on that note, I'd like to know about what Keith would do about the growing trend of surrounding, pressuring, abusing refs nowadays for minimal consequences. So it's I mean, the rules aren't meant to be the referee's only meant to be approached by the captain. We see it week in, week out. United, there's lots of clubs, not just United. I just like to pick on them, but they surround the referee, and it's not right. They need to be mic'd up personally, but you can't mic them up if you're going to have 8 bodies around the referee swearing at him because the kids are going to hear it at home, and it's kind of a devil's advocate, isn't it? What would you like to see done?
I think what we've got to understand is that so far Premier League clubs this season have been fined over £1 million.
Wow! So
far this season, and nobody's announcing that, broadcasting that. The consequences are that if a referee is surrounded by 3 or more players, he has to report that, and then a charge is brought on the club for failing to control the players. So you've probably seen the charges, but not understand the outcome of those charges. So £1 million plus. I think what's happened is a few years ago, under the regime of Mike Riley, they decided to talk about the light touch in refereeing. I don't know what that is, because I'm paid as a referee to control the players. And I think that weak refereeing and sometimes poor refereeing has sent the messages out to players that we've got to protest. I think VAR to some degree has also escalated that problem. We've got to protest because if we don't, VAR will not come in and do things. So the first line at grassroots level in most leagues, they can use a sin bin. They don't use it often enough. In senior football, it's a yellow card. And there was a great referee in the Northeast called Peter Willis. Peter was a sergeant in the police force. And I always remember watching one of his games on Match of the Day. And I refereed in his era as well. And there was a number of players came towards him, questioning a decision. And he went, bang, 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 bang.
That's what needs to be done.
You're done. They didn't question again. So I think that referees have just got to get back their control. And that's up to Howard Webb with regard to discussions pre-season next year to say, look, this is what we're going to do, and then go out and do it. But in the meantime, he's got to get hold of the managers, hasn't he, and say, right, okay, let's show some response and respect in the technical area, because that is now the sideshow that's become a bit of a laugh, really. And for me, it damages the image of the game. Whatever happens at the professional level does cascade down to grassroots level. I mean,
definitely.
I'm president of a club here in Penistone, just out on the outskirts of Sheffield. We run 21 teams, and you can see the kids doing what they see on a Saturday night. Those things take place. The league, I'm also president of a league, and we've had to send a message out to stop the technical areas running onto the pitch every time you want to celebrate a goal.
That's because they've seen Klopp do it and they've seen Arteta do
exactly.
it.
So I think it's just, you don't want to be a spoil sport, but you just want to, the people who are suffering are you lot. You lot that watch the game, because you're only getting on average 55 minutes of playing time.
Yeah.
That's the Premier League. There were 3 games last season, only 45 minutes of actual playing time took place.
It's getting as bad as American football.
So as referees, we're the sole timekeeper at the moment, so we've got that responsibility. As managers and players, we've just got to be more aware. Hey, you've seen it this year, and I don't have to tell you this, and I've not been to a Newcastle game. I've watched it on TV. Because you're at the top end of the league, you will get teams that are below you coming to St James Park with this in mind.
Oh, yeah.
A draw is a win.
Yeah.
So the least amount of time they play, the less chance you've got of scoring. And therefore, all of a sudden, if you watch Arsenal now, as an example, they have an unofficial water break every game. In fact, they have 2 or 3. And the reason
someone goes down and injured, and then
goes down is from a tackle, and he's rubbing his head, and the referee's got to deal with it, and so he can't ignore it. It's the one where he does have to stop the game because of head injuries. But that's the sort of conning that goes on that makes life difficult for referees, and that's why referees, I think, have to be more streetwise in terms of how they officiate games.
Yeah, that was one of the topics, to be fair, was time wasting. Newcastle have been accused of it because of the 55 minutes that you mentioned. We're one of the lowest teams or games that has the ball in play. But that's not down to us. Most of the time, it's down to teams like you mentioned, like Palace, Bournemouth did it. They come to St James's Park and they try to make it difficult. And the longer the game sat at 0-0, the more they time waste, the more they see the draw as a win. Even Man United accused us of time wasting, and they spent 45 minutes at St James's Park with the ball inside the 6-yard box, waiting to take a goal kick for most of the game.
Yeah, I mean, the law changes have not helped.
No.
There's some. I mean, I was asked this question, and just to confirm. If a goalkeeper has possession of the ball in his hands, he has to get rid of it within 6 seconds.
Yeah.
And he's broken the law. When did you or I last see a referee penalise that?
When Alan Shearer was playing.
Very long time.
It was a long time. I remember the rule coming into play.
But it's still there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, for me, I think that the game's got to move to an independent timekeeper. And maybe reconfigure the game as a whole, how many minutes are actually played. If you have at the moment a 60-minute clock, 2:30s, and you actually play 6 minutes, and when the ball's out of play, it stops, then you're guaranteed at least 60 minutes, which is an improvement on the current thing. But lots of people are anti-changing things for change's sake. But it is an area of the game that's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, the Americans were trying to get a 20-minute half-time, weren't they, so they can get a show in and stuff like that. That was never going to happen.
Well, our I refereed on the North American Soccer League in the 80s. I was a guest referee for about 8 weeks.
Wow.
And we had to have 2 1-minute breaks during the game.
All right.
One in the first half, one in the second half for ads. and you know, I'm sort of in this meeting being told this, and I've gone, well, how do you get that? How do you get? And the guy goes, all you have to do, Keith, is when a player's down injured, tell him to stay down. You're having a time break, and that's what we did. And you crossed that, and then you did this to restart it, a 1-minute break. But yeah.
I can imagine all the players running to the touchline and getting a big sponsor banner out and holding it for like 30 seconds.
Look, I can remember my first game was down in Florida, and I travelled to the game in a police car, believe it or not, from the hotel with the sirens blazing, typical American. I mean, I got into the ground. By the way, I was informed that I got to come tracksuit top, but all my kit on, everything prepared. And I thought they didn't have a dressing room. But anyhow, I'm in the police car. We drive into the stadium, Giants Stadium, New York, underneath the stadium, and then all of a sudden I'm driven out onto the middle of the pitch. And I'm going, what's going on? The guy goes, just get out and wave, Mr. Hackett. And I got out, and the crowd went, tonight's referee, guest referee all the way from England, Mr. Keith Hackett, wave. And I think I didn't do that at Rochdale when I refereed there last time. And the other side of that was after about 20 minutes, when the home team got the possession of the ball, got music playing.
Oh, Jesus.
When the away team got the ball, you got and on one occasion,
that would do my head in.
Yeah, on one occasion, the ball gets kicked out to the right wing. That my linesman put his flag up. I blew, and then the next thing you got over the sound system was 3 blind mice.
At least I got a bit of humour in there, I suppose.
Yeah.
I love it.
America.
The other big controversial decision that was made quite recently was obviously the Mitrovic one. He lost his head, cost his team the quarterfinal of the Cup against Man United at Old Trafford. He was right to get a ban. Is 8 games too much or the right amount, or is that setting an example now, saying hands on referees? You know, this is what's going to happen. But the Bruno one on the linesman doesn't get anything. So where do you draw the line?
I said at the time the Bruno one should have been punished retrospectively. I thought the assistant was weak, but it might have been that he didn't identify who touched him or whatever. I'm quite clear. I think I said at the time 10 games minimum. But my thoughts were that he was going to get a 3-match ban for what he did initially, and then 10 games on top of that. To come out 8. Yeah. So in effect, he's had a 5-game ban for laying his hands on the match official, or almost. So for me, that's not enough. The interesting bit here is that it shows how far the FA have come, because in my day, if I sent somebody off and somebody appealed, I would have to go to London. I'd sit in front of a disciplinary committee made up of FA people in the appeal. You know, I mean, I can remember going to early in my career. I'd been at Newcastle. They were playing Wolverhampton Wanderers. The referee, and I shouldn't say this, but he was having a bit of a mare, and he sent Pat Howard off. Now, Pat Howard, I'd come across because he was a Barnsley. He lived up the road from Sheffield. He was Barnsley. And he sent Pat Howard off. And we go in the dressing room at the end of the match. And I said to him, can you tell me what you sent the Newcastle player off for, Pat Howard? He goes, yeah, but so-and-so. I said, I've got to tell you, I was nearer to it than you. No way did he commit a foul. I said, the kid who he was against conned you. So remember, I've only been running the line for about 6 months, and I'm the new kid on the block, and the kid in the middle's quite experienced. Anyhow, the outcome was that we go to an appeal in Sheffield. Newcastle appeal it, and I'm like third in. The referee's been in, the player's been in, the player remains in, and I go in. And I go in, and there's Pat Howard and Joe Harvey. Going back, yeah. So I'm now 70s. I'm in the 70s, 73, something like that. So I go in, and they said, "Right, Mr. Hackett, please explain how you saw and what you saw." I said, "Well, I think that from my position, I got a very clear view. The referee has said that Pat Howard elbowed the opponent. There was no way he elbowed his opponent. The opponent tripped and actually almost fell on top of him 2 yards behind." I said, "You were nowhere near the thing." And of course, afterwards, we're in the pub across the road having a drink, and Joe Harvey came in with Pat Howard and said, "What do you want to drink, boys?" And I've gone, "Did you get off?" And he goes, "Yeah." And the referee just left us. That was it. I never worked with that referee again.
Brilliant. I love it.
But
there is
the process now is that they have an independent panel made up of players and ex-managers. I think that's always dangerous. You know, I mean, there's got to be a balance.
Yeah.
Don't be wrong. But the FA have actually appealed it.
All right.
So the FA have appealed the 8-match ban, believing that it's not enough. So we all wait for the outcome unless it's buried.
Yeah.
Buried on a Sunday night at 12 o'clock when they come out with the decision.
It's like the Everton situation, isn't it? That's a different story, though. There is one bit of technology that I would love. I don't know if it is going to happen or not. You might be able to clear this one up for me. But the offsides need to be using the technology that's in the Champions League. I don't think that should be under any reason why we should be using it, because what we're using now, these lines, it's not clear to anyone. But that is brilliant.
I've said it from day one with VAR. You cannot use broadcast cameras.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm the guy that went to the Premier League and said, "I want goal line technology." And then I worked with Okai for several months to get it to where it now is. And to achieve that, you've got 7 cameras around each goal mouth operating at 500 frames per second. Broadcast cameras are usually about 100 frames per second. They're not accurate enough. It's a no-brainer. I mean, somebody told me today, a journalist came on wanting a comment. I understand that the PGMOL and the Premier League are going to experiment with semi-automated system next year. That's not good enough. It needs to be brought in straight away. We're talking about millions of pounds here. And we're talking about the one important thing in a game is a goal and not a goal. Offside is a lead up to that. So for me, we've got technology that works really well on goal line technology. It's uncomplicated because
it's brilliant.
It does not allow the referee to have an input. It tells the referee it's a goal. That's all.
I love that.
And with offside, that's exactly what you want. Is offside. Now, the complication with the offside law is he
interfering, not interfering, and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, you know, this what they should do. Look, let's pull from a drawer. That's the laws of the game, 1938, and I suggest that those that are listening from the FA should go back and reintroduce this booklet because
you're offside.
Handball, you decide, referee, it's deliberate, because that's what it says. And offside, the same. A deliberate play, with handball and with offside, we can put 100 referees in the room and we're not going to get agreement. You know, we're not going to get agreement. Referees. So that shows you how poor this law is.
Yeah. I agree with
So
that.
semi-automated system has to be in next season.
Yeah. I mean, I love the one they use in the Champions League because it's so uncomplicated. You can see the line, you can see where it's broken, you can see where the defender's last point of contact is, and then you're offside. It's as simple as that, and it's quick.
Yeah, but I mean, like, look, the lawmakers don't they need a wake-up call because whoever sits around the table and says, by the way, handball is underside level with the underside of the armpit.
Oh God, yeah.
Nothing to do with shirt sleeve. I know why they said it weren't shirt sleeve because, like, they get clubs in Italy coming down to the ankle, no arms, sort of thing. But all they've got to do is, like the ball, they put specific sizes. They can measure the length of the shirt sleeve and sort it, but they don't.
Well, that takes us on to handballs, doesn't it? So there's one given as handball, two not given as handball. So the Newcastle one was where Callum Wilson's in the box there, and the ball comes through a crowded players and it just hits him. Yeah. Hits him high up on the arm, falls to his feet, and he's put the ball in the net. He's not made any movement with his arm to the ball to control it. Harry Maguire, again, being a defender, is probably why he's got away with this. He's not trying to handball it. The ball's hit his arm and there's a crowded area. The one for me, 100% should have been given handball, is the Liverpool one because he deliberately makes you can see his elbows in a triangle position. He's deliberately made the movement to hit the ball. So I don't understand the handball rules sometimes. I've always been the kind of person that says, was it deliberate? Did the defender or attacker deliberately move towards the ball? If it's just hit him and you literally yard away and you can't get out the way of it, that's not deliberate handball. So
I mean, I think it's a complete mess. I mean, this law on handball currently is a complete ass. For me, you can get, as I say, you can get 100 referees in a room and you're not even going to get 60-40 on some of these decisions. For me, the Maguire one was handball because he's had long enough to see it, right? And therefore he's got enough time to withdraw. But, players are not going to do that. They're just going to do what is natural. And I think that, we had one the other day where they said it brushed the player. And I'm thinking the evidence that I've looked at on that screen and replayed it a number of times on my TV, it's not even touched his arm. So I'm with you. I mean, as a former boss of the referee, we had these complications. But what we would do is we'd sit in a room, all the referees, we'd play numerous clips, and then I'm telling you, coming out of the room, we would agree those that are going to be penalised and those that are not. And, the lawmakers can sit down and write things that have grey issues in them. What the PGMOL has to do is cut the grey bit. Then the boss of the PGMOL then goes in front of all the managers and says, here's a number of clips. These are handball. Here's a number of clips. These are not handball. By the way, if the ball strikes the hand and goes into the goal, the law, we have to nullify that. It can't be a goal. That's the law. But I would also, as I've done in the past, be making noises to the FA and the IFAB about certain laws. And that's what I think Howard Webb's got to do, to get them to clarify more the various situations. But handball, I mean, the Leeds-Liverpool one, first of all, let's talk about the Maguire one, because Dermot Gallagher, who's a really nice guy, and he was one of my referees, so I brought him onto the list to actually say, because Harry Maguire's in a crowd of players, he gets off. It's an absolute... I just fell off my chair when I listened to it. I'm going, Dermot, you're not on Comedy Hour. You're actually explaining to the public the laws of the game. The one in the Leeds-Liverpool game, he's handled it for sure, right? And then they come out and say it's too far back. Well, how far back did he want to be? Ultimately, at the end of the day, there's 2 or 3 moves and it's in the back of the net.
And it's a massive part of the build-up, wasn't it?
So there's the referee and the VAR, and I'll tell you, when I was the boss, they would get a phone call from me, and I know this sounds harsh, and I'd say, walk the dogs next weekend because you're not going out on a game, mate. You know, and I think there's not enough of that. You know, okay, they came out the other day, didn't they? And they said John Brooks, the VAR, not the referee who should have made the decision, but he's got it wrong. Can't remember what game it was, but there's been that many mistakes. And
game, maybe?
Yeah, so this they say he's taken off the games. Yeah. And then I switched the television on to watch Burnley, and there he is in the middle.
Yeah. He didn't get taken off. He got dropped down the league, didn't he?
Championship,
biggest game.
Championship, but he was already appointed to that game.
Ah, right.
And then he was fourth official to Michael Oliver in the European Cup quarter-final following Wednesday. So, I mean, look.
Not punished.
If you go back in time, one of the best referees this country's had, Mark Clattenburg, he was suspended for a period of time, nothing to do with refereeing, but I lost him for 2 or 3 months. Mike Dean served his suspension for a period of time. Matt Messias from Barnsley, FIFA referee, I dropped him to the Football League. Uriah Rennie was dropped for look, I used to say to the board, I'm the 21st manager in the Premier League. If I'm a manager of a football team and the number 9 fails to put the ball in the back of the net, he don't get picked. Yeah. Why should I be different? Yeah. And why should referees be different? They're professional. They're not amateur now. And somebody said to me the other day, you hammer the referees, Keith. I hammer them because they don't come out and say what they should be saying. Our referee got this wrong. Why he got it wrong? You know, why do they disallow goals? Why don't they give penalty kicks? You know, I mean, the Bournemouth game this weekend? It's absolute nailed-on penalty kick. Stuart Atwell again, by the way, he was VAR and didn't come in, and it's a nailed-on penalty kick. And you come away from that game and saying, well, they do impact on the result and they do impact on league positions. So, and I know we're not going to get a sanitised position, but when I left the PJMOL, the 10 Premier League games each weekend, we had one serious error. One. Right. Invariably every week. I was on the phone or driving to grounds and whatever. And we could never get, I mean, we did have weekends without, but generally we get one. There's now sometimes 2 or 3 in a game.
Well, there's a good stat I read just before we came on, to be honest with you. And this tells you how many odds. There's been an incorrect VAR call once every 37.5 matches in the Premier League since the World Cup, down from every 24.3 matches. That doesn't sound right to me. I don't know where they've got this stat from, because I mean, we can call about 9 issues that happened just over this weekend.
I should have. Look, I keep saying to people, do not try to con the fan, because the fan knows what's going off. They are passionate about their club. They watch other games and watch other teams, and they see the same level of errors. You know, I mean, Mike Riley used to come out. He used to really annoy me because he used to come out and say, we're 98% accurate. And I go, and then I asked the question and I got an answer. Yeah, goal kicks, throw-ins and corner kicks were included to make that stat. I mean, like, the game's about what are the key major incidents, and that is the ones that affect the game. Incorrect sending off of a player who's committed harry-carry and doesn't get sent off, a penalty kick, you know, not given. But see, what they say is it's not an error if the referee says no and the VAR says no. That's what they're telling us. It's not recorded. It's not an error.
Brilliant.
You and I know it's an error.
Yeah, I love it.
I mean,
yeah.
I just think that they make themselves look stupid, coming out with statistics when in fact, what they should be doing is actually saying, look, this weekend, these 5 come out. And in fairness, I think Derek Gallagher's changing a little bit. Under the regime of Mike Riley, he followed Mike Riley's "you will say this." And I think that he might be just getting a bit of freedom.
I hope so.
He did say this weekend the Bournemouth thing was a penalty kick. And I thought, wow, that's a change. He's normally explaining that it's not because something happened 3 miles away on another pitch. I mean,
50 miles away in a trailer somewhere and they didn't see it properly. I love it.
I think it's an injustice, really, that they don't recognise at the moment that apart from Michael Oliver, Anthony Taylor, they've got a shortfall in terms of quality of referees. It's as simple as that.
I agree with that. One of our owners took to Twitter and has asked a pretty good question, actually. I want to get your thoughts on it. Here it is. So not specific about today, but it's clear VAR, whilst a positive addition, takes too much time and varies to inconsistency from game to game. Perhaps we should allow VAR officials to review the play only twice for maximum 1 minute. And if they can't divine an opinion from then, it's unlikely to be clear and obvious. Mistake on the pitch, decision should then be allowed to be proceed. So basically giving the referee a minute to make a decision. If it's not clear and obvious, then you go with the original decision that was made. Either it's not a penalty or it is a penalty, for example.
Jamie, I agree 100%. I'm with you 100%. I think ultimately at the end of the day, I think there's 3 or 4 changes that have got to take place for us to buy into VAR. One, the panel of VAR operators have got to be separate. You can't referee on a Saturday and VAR on a Sunday. It's just not conducive to good management. So for me, get them in, get them trained up, right? There's no relationship problem. Oh, crikey, I've only been on the list for a year and now I'm VAR to Michael Oliver. When Michael Oliver needs him, he don't come in because he thinks, oh, Michael Oliver don't make that mistake. You know, Michael Oliver hasn't got the view. He don't want to come in and ruin Michael Oliver. So there's a relationship problem that would be resolved if there's just VAR operators. So that's the first thing. I'm 100% that time limit's got to be brought in. 3 minutes is ruining the game. It's just like a nonsense. Let's find the problem. You know, the next thing is just take a leaf out of rugby union, and that is VAR, the referee, and the big screens in the stadiums. I know there's a problem at Man United and Liverpool, so that might have influenced the outcome. But I do think the big screens and what the referee and VAR is saying should be played in the stadium.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think just mic them up. Let's listen in to what's going off. Let's have the discussion. And by the way, you've got on the semi-automated offside system, you've got it.
Yeah.
That will be very quick, as we see in the Champions League. And I think anything else, if we're going hunting, fine. Define, you know, alongside that, define to everybody what the PGMOL referees as a group define as handball.
Yes, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the other thing. I mean, I love my cricket. So cricket to me has got the third umpire down as VAR, down to a T.
Yes.
The umpire on the field makes a call. He will say to the third umpire, I don't think that carried, or I do think it did carry. From that, the third umpire looks at it and goes, right, I can't see any evidence to overturn your decision, go with it.
Correct.
You know, but that umpire has the final decision, not the on-field umpire anymore. It goes down into who was in the box. Now, could VAR do that as well?
Yeah, I think I'd see no reason why the operation of VAR can operate as efficiently as we see in cricket and rugby union.
Yeah.
We know that the laws of the game, Law 5 at the moment, says that the sole the sole decision maker is the referee. But ultimately, at the end of the day, come to the right decision. I think what we want is quick, accurate decisions. And when we see that we're not getting quick, accurate decisions, and we're getting people like Howard Webb having to apologise, you can only apologise once, by the way, because then it becomes a serial offence. And the manager loses respect and says that nothing changes.
Yeah,
so
we're just getting letters week in, week out.
Yeah. And, I mean, the one thing is that Howard will try to affect change. He's a good communicator. He's different to Riley. I've every anticipation that things will improve, only providing he gets rid of a few referees. Don't ask me to name them.
I'm not going to ask you to do them. That's disrespectful.
But if you look at the if you look at the Premier League.com and you go onto their website and then you look at more and you go to referees, you'll see a referee index. And the referee index shows the number of games, the number of red and yellow cards issued by each referee.
Yeah.
And you'll see somebody like Paul Tierney has had 20-odd games, 23 games. Oliver's just one less. Taylor is one less. But you've got somebody like Kavanagh, 9. Graham Scott, 6. So, a referee's like a player. If you're refereeing week in, week out, you become a better referee. The more you're doing,
more experience, the better you get. Yeah,
you're sharper the brain and everything. And these guys who have only had they'll have had Championship and Football League games, but 6, 7. I think if I was 6, 7, I'm getting paid 100 grand. It's the same as Michael Oliver. I think I'd be thinking, is my job at risk?
Yeah,
and if I was the boss, I would be saying, if I've only picked him 6 times, what's the reason? Is he injured? Is he first year and he's got to be given a chance? And if not, I'd be saying, son, down to the Championship and below.
Yeah, I agree. Pete, what's your question on VAR? Or have we covered it?
But do you say, Keith, that the decisions have been worse than the previous season since VAR's come in? Because there's been a lot this season that there's been a lot of complaints about.
Yeah, I think that the facts are that when we look at how VAR has been operated by the Premier League referees, the PGMOL, if they make any claim that it's improved over the 4 years that they've had it, remember, first of all, it ran in America for a year before we took it on because we didn't want it. Then in year 1, when we did have it, the PGMOL year 1, Mike Riley didn't use the monitors. They were there, but they were never used. In year 2, coming under pressure, his answer was, we're going to use the monitors sparingly. In 380 games, they used them 3 times. So you see how they've not, in my opinion, bought in 100%. Because I'm telling you, when things were going wrong when I was the boss, I used to say to them, bring your kit because you're here all week. By the time we go into a game next Saturday, we're all going to be on the same page. And I feel that VAR operators, I'll tell you what I would do. I'd be dynamic. I would close Stockley Park, which is difficult in itself because of the technology. I'd close it. I would bring the VAR into the stadium.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And therefore, I would then say, right, arriving at the ground in the bus, the referees, the assistant referees, and the VAR people, right? They walk out on the pitch to get a feel and understanding.
Mm.
At half time, they can have a chat.
Yeah.
At full time, right, they
Yeah,
review.
debrief.
They
Yeah.
review. So the manager, who has a right, by the way, 30 minutes, there's an agreement, 30 minutes after the game, the manager can come in and chat to the referee and seek clarification.
Right.
Well, there's the VAR sat in that room with the referee. They can't look at each other, right? They will do. But can you imagine? Fucking managers saying, by the way, there was a penalty kick in the 67th minute. Why didn't you blow for it? And he goes, what? The referee goes, what? And the VAR goes, didn't think it was one. I mean, the reality is, put it in a working environment, because that's what it is.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, I used to employ sales guys, and at the end of the day, they were given a budget. They had to deliver to that budget. Sometimes they were falling short of the budget. They get retrained.
Yeah.
They'd understand that's what they have to do. And I think no different in referee. You know, there's a lot of things going off behind the scenes, a lot of work being done. But I feel that at the moment, VAR is letting us all down. It's spoiling our enjoyment. We can't watch a goal being celebrated anymore. You know, I mean, you get a wonderful left foot shot by Hamlin, and like you all think, wow, that's a worldie. And then they all stand there thinking, can we celebrate it?
Yeah. Someone might be an inch offside, so even though they didn't touch the ball, but they might be in line of sight of the goalkeeper, so it's offside. Oh God, yeah.
Well, yeah.
It does my head in that.
So
Blade, go on, sorry,
my
Keith.
frustration.
Yeah. Blade, what's your question about VAR?
Right, so mine actually starts with a quote from Lucas Brudd, who I believe was the secretary of IFAB at the time.
He is.
So he
still is.
He still is. So he when he first came in, he came out, made a statement: minimum interference and maximum effect. We don't want to create something in football that's constantly interruptive and destroying the game. Now, in Europe, we see VAR working effectively. In England, we don't. So, Keith, who do you think falls at fault for that?
Well, fortunately, the guy who's at fault is the guy that's leaving, Mike Riley. Anything and everything that's happened, the decline in refereeing standards, in my opinion, despite the fact that they refute that, but I generally believe the decline isn't about fitness levels and all that aspect. It's about actually the big decisions. And for me, the big decisions, there's been a decline. And that's why VAR was introduced. And they were so specific. And, you know, I attended meetings in Europe promoting the idea of VAR with Lucas Brudd sitting at the side of me. And the quote that you said, I've heard that a dozen times. And the thing is, the managers of referees in Europe took that on board and they operate that. What do? We're influenced to some degree by the media, and then they get confused. So what it ought to be a fairly simple process where we should be the best at it, right, becomes an almost unbelievable scenario. I tell a story because a few years ago, before it was about to be introduced, and I did a TV thing with Nigel Owens, the rugby union referee, and I mean, he was a world-class match official, and he said to me, Keith, your guys, and I was the boss then, but your guys have to be careful that they don't become lazy. And he said, I'm going to give you an analogy that I use with rugby referees coming through. Think of a tightrope walker. He's got no safety net. I'll tell you what, he's high up. He's got a pole to keep his balance. Every step he takes with care, with great accuracy. And his focus is without question. Because if he does the wrong thing, he's dead.
Yeah.
Now think of the tightrope walker with a safety net, complacent, lazy, because he knows if he falls off, the net's going to save him.
Yeah.
So he takes risks. That's exactly what we've seen. I've witnessed referees, like Craig Pawson, the Liverpool Leeds game, right? He's in a good position. He saw that handball, but lazy. My mate in Stockley Park will pull me out of the mire, and he doesn't. And that's what's happening.
Yeah.
I've seen referees in great. David Koo this week gave a penalty kick from a really good position and sold it. There wasn't even a VAR check, and I'm thinking, he sold it to me and he sold it to everybody else and the VAR guy. But if you're hesitant and you go, which way the wind's blowing, I think I'll give a penalty kick. Referees are in the selling game. We sell decisions, and we have to convince you as spectators that what we say, we believe in.
Yeah.
Look at the faces. Look at the faces of some of the referees. They're in the headlights. And then they smile because they go, just a minute. Don't worry. VAR's going to come in.
Yeah, it's a very fine balancing act, isn't it? Unfortunately,
it is.
We talk about the handball rule. I like to keep an eye on what's going on. 28 minutes ago, Alan Shearer has tweeted, "What a load of shit the handball law is, a complete mess." So obviously something's happened in the Bayern Man City game with another handball decision. So it just shows you, doesn't it? It's not just our game; it's the Champions League now as well.
Well, the reality is the law. Look, can you remember David Ellery?
Yeah.
Because David Ellery is the guy that took on the task as the IFAB technical director to rewrite the laws and simplify them. And being a housemaster at Harrow School and understanding English, instead of having one word that actually explains something, you get 15. I mean, like the well, listen, you've got one of the world's very best players, former best players, saying the handball law is a mess. As a former international referee, I'm saying it's a mess. Halsey's saying it's a mess. It's a mess. And can the game allow itself to put itself in this position? I don't think it can.
First goal is a handball, but VAR said it was too early. Yeah, we covered that bit, Les.
Well, I mean, that was a nonsense decision.
Exactly. Because it impacted the game, it impacted the goal. It shouldn't have been allowed.
Yeah.
Right, last question for you, Keith, because we've been on a bit longer than that. I wanted to keep you in. We appreciate you talking to us as long as you have. This one's more of a football fan. Who's going to finish in the top four? There's no pressure. Obviously, we're Newcastle fans. You don't have to say Newcastle, but I'm sure.
I'm not saying. I think Newcastle will finish in the top four, and I think deserve to be in the top four. And then with a couple of acquisitions, big ones, next year, then they'll make a real challenge for the Champions League. So I think, I thought at one stage I was going with Brighton, but they're too far behind, aren't they? I think that's how
7 points. They've got 2 games in hand, though. That's the only.
Yeah.
But they've got the FA Cup to worry about. Obviously, that's this weekend. I think they've got their eyes on that. Villa are obviously flying. They absolutely battered us.
Doing well, isn't he?
I hate saying that.
No, he's doing well.
Very well.
I think he'll finish up as top 4 now.
I like that.
Other than I think I'd just be interesting to see Arsenal Manchester United, the Arsenal game against Man City.
Man City, it's
now
Wednesday
that
next week today, isn't it? A week today?
Yeah.
Week what? Yeah.
I thought I'd tell you this if you're not aware. On Sunday the 23rd, you've got a 2:00 kickoff against Spurs.
Yeah.
You've got to put up with David Koo. And VAR is Neil Swarbrick. And on the 27th, you play at Everton. And you've got Andre Mariner and Chris Kavanagh as VAR. Andre should have retired about 3 years ago. He's a lovely guy, but he's got no pace. Everton, smaller pitch.
Well, yeah, we have to beat Everton. I do not like losing to them or even get anything going wrong. Andy says, thanks, Keith. Great to hear all the insightful stories. Should be on every week. I would love Keith on every week, but I'm sure he's got a life to live and he doesn't want to be stuck here every week. And it's just nice to be able to speak to an ex-professional. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, thanks for joining in as well. Pete, what you got coming up next?
Be back with a preview for the Spurs game tomorrow.
Ooh, I'm doing mine Friday. So tune in on Friday for that. But from all of us, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your night. Take care.
Thank you.